Hello and welcome to episode 4 of TemTalk, a podcast dedicated to the creature collection MMO Temtem. In today's episode, we're going to be doing a deep dive on combat and game mechanics in Temtem. Right off the bat, I want to welcome back friend of the show, Presby Kennedy. Kennedy, how you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. It's great to be here.
You've survived another week of coronavirus. I'm happy to still have you here. That's great.
Yeah, I'm dosing up on like vitamin C, super heavy. Got like 3 oranges next to me.
Oh, that's good.
They'll never take me alive.
By the way,
or hopefully they will take me alive.
You appreciate the upgrade of title of friend of the show now.
Yes. I got to grind out, I guess, a couple more side quests to increase my reputation.
That's right. You're getting there. Today, our main topic is we're going to take a deep dive into the combat and game mechanics and talk about the math and all the stats behind it. So more math for Temtem. Are you ready for that?
Yeah. And I was saying right before the show, it's just like, you handle all of the math for me.
Literally the equation. Before we get into that, though, let's go over a few things. Let's talk about what was in the news this week. So the first thing that we saw is on Twitter that they revealed a sneak peek of a new combat animation for an existing move. And you're going to have to right away correct me. Is it Oshi Dashi? Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, Oshi Dashi or Oshi Dash.
Yeah, so if you look at their Twitter account, they got a nice clip of it. It's an amazing look. It's like a punch move that literally sends the enemy Temtem flying off the screen. So I think it looks very cool. I know people on Reddit were excited about it.
Yeah, the sad thing about that move, it's only got like 1 hold or like 2 holds, but it just really feels like the ultimate finisher of any match. I can't wait till that gets in game and just I don't know, like that's how you end a match with style. You just send the last Temtem flying into oblivion.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it sends the Temtem flying. It's kind of weird if you don't feint that Temtem. How does it get back onto the battlefield?
We don't talk about gravity in Temtem. We just don't ask any questions.
And then the other thing, I don't know, did you see this, that they were giving away game codes with Ninjas at Home this week?
I actually did. I was super excited about that when they announced that, and I was following the Ninjas with Gaming, and I didn't exactly see how to enter or become eligible for that, because the Ninjas at Home, they've just responded like, just follow our Twitter and we'll be giving them out. And I didn't exactly see where they went or who got them, but for anybody who wants to get into Temtem, as the game gets more and more features, it's going to eventually be upgraded to a full price game. So it's great to get a copy of it now, especially if you can get a copy for free. But anybody who is playing Temtem, one of the things inside of the game is there's a limited resource of an item called telomere hacks that you can only get currently from playing through the game, completing the game, then resetting your account and selling those off. And there's a lot of people making a lot of money by running alternate accounts through the game, getting the telomere hacks and then selling them and then resetting their alternate account. So I was really excited to hopefully try and get in and get like a extra copy of the game, but I was not lucky enough.
Out of curiosity, what are people selling those for? Do you know what the going market rate of a hack is?
It really depends. If you're just selling it off your main account, a lot of people just sell it for about 20,000 Pansun.
Per each one?
Yeah,
for each one. Is that for a specific one or just any of them?
Well, there's only 5 of them in the game right now, or 7. There's 5 telomere speed hacks in the game you can pick up, which increase the base value of your speed SV. And then there's 2 ones for attack in game, and they plan on implementing more. And then, Free Tim Society ever so often, we'll have 1 or 2.
Each of those sells for 20,000 roughly to other players?
Yes.
So you're making like 140,000 or something each time you rerun through the game?
Yeah, and some people are getting so good at running through the game they can do it in about 3 or so hours.
That's crazy.
But then if you're doing it for other people, sometimes people will pay you for your time too, and then that's where the money really gets invested.
Well, that's interesting. That's a good Pansuns per hour, certainly. If that's your style. I mean, some people probably rightfully so don't want to just regrind through the storyline, but as an option to make money, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I restarted my account once just to inject it with funds. Because even if you don't have an alternate account, since there's not a lot of progress and there's not achievements in the game, if you really want to do this, even with a single account, just find a trustworthy friend, transfer them all the Temtem you care about, and then you could delete your character, restart, and have them transfer them back. You just have to have a friend willing to transfer you the items and Temtem and amount of Temtem that you want to do. But even without an alternative, some people could do now, I suppose.
Yeah, and one of the things of like why the telomere hacks are so valuable is Lumas in the game are guaranteed to have 3 perfect SVs, but their other stats can be anything. And so the telomere hacks help, make Lumas more competitively viable for the upper end players.
Right. The next thing I want to do before we go into the main topics, I just wanted to just chit chat a little bit, check in, talk about what we're each doing in the game. Me personally, what I've been up to, I think it's the same for a lot of people, but let's just talk to our personal experiences and hopefully some listeners are interested and compared to their own. I've been busy, of course, doing the weekly free Temtem, as I'm sure you are as well. Have you been doing it every week, or have you missed any?
I missed 1 week. I actually started my character with no shirt because I just thought it was such a cool option. And so for the longest time, I did not have a shirt in the game. And the 1 week of free Tim that I missed was the week they were giving away a free shirt. So I bought a shirt
shirtless?
the week. No, I bought a shirt.
Oh, okay.
Well, wait, I bought a swimming top the week before last.
Nice.
Though for the Free Tim Society this week, I did not think I was going to get it. They had the 3x Mushi in the Sci Park, which was 3 times the rate to get a Luma, which was 1 in every 2,600 encounters you'd get a Luma Mushi, and Mushuk is one of my favorite Temtem. And I was like, well, I'm just going to grind this all week, and I probably won't be able to do the free Tim. And day 1 of going to the Sci Park, about 3 hours in, I got a Luma Mushi, and I was like, oh my
Congrats. Is that your first Luma?
I am actually a part of the accidental 5% of players that have like a Luma beforehand. I got my girlfriend into Temtem, and she is incredibly lucky. I bought it for her on the second day of Temtem being out. She goes in and plays for like an hour of us together. And then I'm like, I'm going to get off tonight and go to sleep. And she's like, okay, I'll just play for like 30 more minutes. Goes into the wild, and on her second encounter on her own, she gets a Luma Yankee. Yeah, catches it. And it's like, I don't really like this Tim. You can have it. And I was like, what?
It was a Luma Yankee too. That's a big one for this to have. That's very usable in the storyline. Wow, so you're one of those people that people hate on Reddit that just walked into a Temtem. Wow.
She was. I don't accept that hate.
But by proxy, you benefited.
Yeah, by proxy, it was
Luma.
me.
So you have 2 Lumas. Well, you're 2-0 to me. I don't have any Lumas yet. That's one thing I haven't done. I haven't farmed in the Sci Park for Lumas. I definitely want to do it for the right Temtem, but that grind that could go on for hours and hours, that's not something that appeals to me just yet. I'm not in a hurry. If they really give a Temtem I really want, by all means I'll do it. But they've said that they're going to put more active ways to hunt them. So I'm like, I might just wait till it's a little bit easier and controllable, But by all means, kudos to those people going for it.
Yeah, it's really weird when you talk about Lumas inside of the Sci Park, because it is one of those things that kind of forces... It's a very strange area of the game for me. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it because it kind of forces players to go into the Sci Park. And whenever you're in the Sci Park, you're not making money, but you're making the most potential money you could. So like this week they put Adoraboros in there as a 2x Luma. The rates at which Adoraboros sell for, as opposed to how many encounters you have to go through to logistically get a Luma Adoraboros if you're just the most unlucky person in the world, equates to about 15 hours of farming. And then at the end of that 15 hours, if you get a Luma Adoraboros and sell it, you've made more Pansun per hour as opposed to anything else you could be doing in the game at the time, which I think equates to like 27,000 Pansun per hour.
That's
or
a lot more than
something.
Catch and releasing.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, one, you need to be able to grind Adoraboros for 15 hours plus. You need to be able to not have any, like, be financially okay in the game of not having any other type of income during that time, while you're grinding for that Adoraboros, because, you know, you're not releasing free Tem, you're not getting any items to sell or anything like, or breeding up any Temtem to sell to other players. And you have to just like be very comfortable that I'm just going to grind at this until I get it. And so for me, it's a very uncomfortable area of the game of just like, I'd rather go with the safe bet of making money, of doing free Tem Society and releasing Tems inside of like the C note and everything, because it's like, I know even if I'm super unlucky or something comes up in life and interrupts my 15-hour farm, that at least I walk away with some money that moves me forward in the game. Yeah,
that's what people on Reddit have been like saying to people that are frustrated, like the ones that have like done 48 hours of farming and not gotten it. They're like, if you really want Lumas, it's a safer bet for your sanity to just grind Pansuns through catching and releasing and buying one, and then you know it's an exact set amount of time until you'll get one. Where of course, if you want to gamble, I mean, go for the Sci Park. Because you said that 15 hours, I mean, it's all RNG. If you catch 2 of them in that 15 hours, then your money per hour like doubles, you know, to 52,000 Pansuns. But if you don't, you might not catch any. You might spend 15 hours and not catch any, and you've made 0 money. And you basically, you know, you've lost the opportunity cost of 10 to 15,000 Pansuns per hour that you could have been making. So yeah, it's a huge gamble. That's why I stay away from it. I haven't spent a lot of time in the Sci Park. I really haven't. I think I like that they have some weekly content that changes and gives people an option. But anyone that's frustrated with it, my kind of take or advice is, even you can't even say it yourself, you're forced to go in there, but you're really not. No one's forcing you to go in there. You could just ignore it completely. But as a min-maxer, I get what you're saying. If you really want to, you know, maximize your time and opportunities and rewards out of the game, like they're forcing you in to do a lot of time and spend time in there. So it just kind of depends on your play style, I suppose.
Yeah, and I would like to state for the record, I went for Mushi because I like the Temtem Mushi. I grinded for about an hour and a half for Adoraboros, and I was like, nah, I'm just going to go play the rest of the game.
This is the closest week I came. I was like, either of those Lumas would be pretty cool. And I was a little tempted last week because a Blues, and you have to help me here, Dendry? How do you say that grass? Was it Dendry?
Yeah. Dendry or Dendre?
I think the golden Dendry or Dendre looks really cool. I almost did it last week, but even then I was still like, nope, still, I don't like these Temtem quite enough to do it. But we'll see. Yeah,
and Cerny has a really cool position right now in the metagame of being completely useless, but there are like a few select strategies where you can set up a Cernif on the field where it becomes unkillable and it deals potentially infinite amounts of damage and it just wins you the game.
And that's just unkillable because of like stat defense increases and then revitalizing, or what?
It's a nature type, so its main weakness is toxic and fire.
And it's only got those two vulnerabilities since it's a single
Yes, type. And Ukama is really, really big right now inside of the competitive scene and pushes out a lot of fire Temtem, but fire Temtem are there to counter crystal. So if there's a way you can kind of set up your picks and bans so where you don't pressure your opponent to bring any fire Temtem, and because, you know, they won't have to counter out your crystal hitters if you don't have big crystal hitters. And if you bring answers for like toxic type, you can kind of get to like your last 2 picks sometimes and just like nobody has an answer for a Cernif.
Right.
And it's
that makes sense.
Because nobody plans for Cernif. And it's
right.
No one's
weird that and worried about it.
Powerful Temtem.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. I like, and again, I really like the look of Cerny, especially the golden ones. So out of any of the ones I've missed, that's probably my biggest regret, but I'll be okay. I didn't need that. I didn't need the risk of going insane and not catching it.
So what have you been up to this week in Temtem?
Yeah, so besides, I'm actually going to miss this week's free Temtem Road. I'm ashamed to say it, but I don't think I'm going to get there. I'm like still under 100 Temtem. Yeah, and I don't know if I want to grind out 200 or not this week. I might still do it. We'll see. I don't want to miss cosmetic items because who knows if you'll ever be able to get these again, right? That FOMO or the fear of missing out on this cosmetic item that might be time limited might drive me to do it. We'll see.
I'm not 100% certain with these rock goggles that are the reward, but I'm fairly certain, like 65 or 75% certain that you can buy these from the cosmetic shop inside of Tumka, and they're like 40,000 Pansun. So this week's free Tim reward is like cool because most of the time free Tim rewards are worth about 20,000 Pan Sun.
Sure.
So it's cool because you get a 40,000 Pan Sun item, but you don't really have to feel super pressured because if you miss it, I think you can go buy it from
nice.
Tumka.
I mean, that's kind of my general attitude approach. Hopefully coming off is I'm going to do exactly what I want to do and I'm having fun with. And if I'm not having fun doing that or spending that time on it, I'm not going to stress myself out about it. I know a lot of people are really they want to get the most out of it, and that's cool, but that's not me. I'm only going to do the content I want to do.
Yeah, I started competitive battling this week using the Temporium GG rank ladder that they have on there. And I probably had half of my team perfectly bred and ready to go, and then the other half was just like pretty good Temtem that I've just had and I TV trained.
Tell me about that. What perfect Temtem do you have so far, and briefly why'd you pick each of them, or was it all meta choices, or anything personally speaking about those Temtem that you just like?
The perfect one I have, we talked about last week, Mix. I bred from scratch and I love my Mix. It has Puppet Master. You can engineer some really cool chess situations, putting your opponent into checkmate with it. Then I have Mushuk, and my Mushuk is I bought it as an egg off of the trading channel, and it was a gamble egg, and it had 7 perfect SVs and could get any of the good ability or the bad ability. I got the bad ability and I built around it.
Oh no.
Unfortunately, but it's still people don't expect it. I run it with speed and attack, and the second it comes out, I put it there to push out sweepers. And then my other one is the Gazuma that my girlfriend gave me. It actually rolled all of its perfect stats in the things that you need Kazuma to have good stats in.
Oh,
nice. And it's not so perfect.
You're flexing that Luma Temtem in your competitive battles on people.
Yeah, yeah. So I had those 3 all TV trained and ready to go. And then I was running a Ryken that I used through the storyline, and I redid its TVs just because it's like a really beefy tank.
Just aesthetically, I love Raiken. It's like a giant fire line. Are you kidding me? That's the coolest thing ever.
Volaren's the most banned Temtem in the game, so I put a Volaren on my team, not even expecting to use it, just hoping it ate a ban.
Soak up that ban.
Yeah, and it happened a few times.
And it's not even a perfect Volaren, but your opponents don't know that, right? Is that what you're saying? It's just
exactly.
a Volaren. That's awesome. That's smart. That's really smart. It's a pro tip. That's good.
Well, and so I had a couple battles, and the times I got my strategy going, it was great, but I still lost every single match because there were competitive bugs that I didn't know about on how you have to put your Temtem into the competitive box. So my moves weren't properly going off, and I accidentally crystal bit my own sweeper when I was trying to buff it.
Oh no.
And there was another time where I not strangled, but I used my Kazuma zapped one of my Temtem instead of doing turbo choreography. I'm like, what's going on? And the person I was in a match with messaged me and it's like, hey, you've attacked yourself twice. Make sure you do this with your Temtem just so next time you're in a match, all of the moves work. And I was like, oh, okay.
What went wrong exactly? What did you have to do? I'm not aware about this.
So you can put your Temtem in the box, the competitive box, and then they're registered inside of the competitive box the whole time. And even though if you change their moves or anything like that while they're in the box, it glitches out and puts their base moves on there. So it might say you have turbo choreography as your first move, but let's say the first move that Temtem ever learned was DC beam, which is an electric attack that deals 30 electric damage. Because you changed it while it was registered in the competitive box, it glitches out and it displays turbo choreography, but it's actually DC.
So it's going to save their setup when they've been placed into the box. So if you want to change it, you take them out of the box, change their moves, and put them back in.
You have to take them out of the competitive box, deregister them from the competitive box, take them out of your PC, into your party, change all of their moves into the PC and then into the competitive box.
Sure.
And then just don't touch them. Just leave them there. And that, like, once I did that, my third match, I stopped attacking myself. But my third match, I also played against somebody who I'd played against earlier, and he knew my strategy, and he didn't ban my bad Valoran. He banned my
yeah, that's kind of only works. That trick only works once, or until someone figures it out.
Yeah, and then I got swept because I had crappy Temtem. But so now I'm breeding up like a full like competitive team, and I've got all of my Temtem. I'm just TV training them now.
Well, I wish we didn't know each other at the time. But so speaking of the Temtem, I've been perfectly breeding. The very first one I went for after failing Anahar, like I mentioned doing, that was my first attempt at breeding. But then once I restarted my character, played through the game, and the first perfect Temtem I bred, I did breed a Voloran, and I had extras. I could have sold you one, but now I just have the one left. But yeah, myself, I went for Voloran. My kind of strategy for picking what I've been spending a lot of time just breeding a perfect Temtem. I haven't actually done any competitive battling, but I'm still working on the team. But basically what I do is I try to look at the meta or a tier list and what's on like the upper echelons of that, and then I just pick Temtem I like off of it. That's as much of the effort I've been putting in it. And Voloran, like you said, is the most banned Temtem, so that kind of caught my eye. But I thought it's fascinating that Voloran only has a single vulnerability, right, to lightning, and it's resistant or neutral to everything else. So I'm like, that's never going to be bad, right? So that was the first choice I went for. And then the second Temtem I bred perfect, and I bred a bunch of extras too. I kind of did our strategy last week where I try to get 5 or 6. So I pay for all my breeding items, then I make a profit on top of that each time I do this. I really like, in anything like fantasy lore or game, I always like krakens and octopuses and things like that. So I had to go for a Calibus. That was the second perfect Temtem I bred. And then I worked on Lapinites for a Zunareth. And by the way, correct me if I'm saying any of these wrong, by all means.
No, yeah. I'm looking, but yeah, it's all good.
And Xenarath, I picked totally, again, I saw it was like, it's like a, on the upper tiers of the quote unquote tier list that exists. But I'm like, it's just such a big, massive, intimidating looking Temtem. I'm like, I got to have one of these. I want one.
Man, I shoutcasted a competitive match on Thursday, which was like a King of the Hill type series where one person would start battling and then they would just battle until somebody defeated them, then that person would battle on stream. And one guy swept 3 games with just a Valash Xenareth start, and all they did was just Crystal Spike for like 5 turns in a row until the Xenareth killed itself in overexertion.
Did they do did they have Madness buff up a bunch first to get its stats?
No, they just, the only move they knew was Crystal Spikes. This is my move, and I do it well. Although you did say something that I wanted to comment on with Voloran, as far as like it being the most banned Temtem. It was the most banned Temtem. I think right now it's going into Gaialis. And just a little information I want to put out for everybody on Gaialis. I commentate on the Temtem competitive scene. And I feel like everybody pays too much respect to Gaialis as far as like when they're banning it and stuff. And then I played competitive Temtem battling, and all the respect that Gaialis gets in the pick and ban phase is 100% earned because I didn't ban Gaialis 2 games and got destroyed. Gaialis Ukama right now is probably one of the best starts for any team. It covers all of Gaialis's weaknesses.
What was the second one? Gaialis
Gaialis Ukama. It's just a very, very high pressure, high damage start. It's a very strong board state to any game. Generally, if you see that on your opponent's team, just go ahead and ban the Gaialis. Don't even give yourself like time to sweat about it or try and think. Just ban the Gaialis. You'll be good.
Good to know. I just finished breeding a Volvir because I needed a fire and earth type, so I'm like, that's perfect. Let's get him in there. And then I revisited my failed Anahir just because I got gender locked so many times with Volvir that I had like 3 or 4 males with like 3 and 5 SVs. It was very easy to take a female Anahir and turn into a bunch of perfect Anahirs. So I'm working on selling some of those. Yeah, I've made up for my earlier failure, so I have a perfect Anahir as well now. And then I'm working on Nidrasil because for two reasons. One, a three-headed snake is amazing, and I just think that's so
It
cool.
looks so cool.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest looking Temtem. If that was, I said I'd take a Luma mix, but a Luma Nidrasil would also be amazing looking at the bright green version of it. So that's my current project because Nidrasil I know is a good setup for with Tri Apothecary for capturing and releasing Temtem, putting that poison debuff every time it attacks. So I figure I'll get a perfect one for that, and I just like it. So are you working on breeding anything? What's your next perfect Temtem you're going to go for?
My next perfect Temtem, I am going to go for a Pigapack. Pigapack is, or Pig Epic, Pigapack, however you want to say it.
I'll say we talked about this offline. What's the is it Pig Epic or Pigapack?
Yeah, let's go with Pig. I like Pigapack, but let's go with Pig Epic because I feel like that's more accepted by the community.
I was post. By the way, I forgot to mention at the top of the show. We're on YouTube now. These episodes, we have a YouTube channel. If you just search TemTalk, you should be able to find it. You will have to auto correct it because YouTube's going to think you're trying to find Team Talk. But by all means, put a comment in on how you say what you think the right name is. Or send me an email at temtalkshow@gmail.com. And we'll see what gets more votes before next week. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, I'm gonna breed a Pig Epic because it is such a good Temtem. It has so many just like great builds for it.
That Bamboozle.
Bamboozle, but also the amount of like pressure Fainted Curse brings to a team. When you have like a Pigapack that's sitting at like 5% HP and it's just on the field and it's going to deal 40% damage to whoever kills it, like the opponent's just like, I'm not touching that Pigapack.
They just want to ignore it.
Yeah, and when you ignore Pigapack, it just bamboozles like crazy.
Yep.
And it has a pretty decent special attack between its Tornado and its other moves. So it's a great addition to any team. And now that I have like all the Temtem I want, now I need to start like just building the base of my team to like better support them.
We talked about off the air how Piga Epic or Pigapack will be one of the new ones that will get the new animation for its move too. So is Oshi Dash E used in any of its builds? Is it at all, or do people not even use that right now because of its hold move?
As far as I know, it is not used.
Well,
just because
that's too bad.
Yeah, just because most of the things you see on Pig Epic, turbo choreography is so great for speed control. In games, Bamboozle is a must-have for Pig Epic because once you get the turbo choreography and your speed's up, you can Bamboozle quicker than other Tims, and you can negate your opponent's moves at the top of the round. Tornado, just having a little bit of that special pressure, and it's like one of its most damaging attacks, is another thing that it brings for, catching toxic switch-ins and just laying down a little bit extra damage on sweepers. Its final move is normally the one that's flexible, is where you'd see something like Oshidashi there. But most of the time I see people running like a backup Relax in that slot, and Relax is one of those things that's kind of like Mix and kind of like Cernif, where you can engineer situations with it where you can't lose the game. And an example of that would be you turbo choreography your team so that they move faster than the enemy team. Your sweeper has more speed investment than your Pigapack. And then so at the top of the round, your sweeper attacks, and then your Pigapack relaxes before the enemy team can move and puts everybody to sleep. You rest for a turn, the next turn, the top of the round, your sweeper attacks, your Pigapack relaxes and put everyone to sleep. And you do that for 20 turns until you win.
Yeah, it's kind of Pig Epic's very, very popular for that reason. Have you been anything you've been up to in the game, or are you ready to move on?
Yeah, crying through competitive Temtem matches. I think that's about it for me. I know as far as like with the community, I've been shoutcasting games every Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, and most Saturdays for Temporium GG doing their Temtem Masters series. And that you can find that on Twitch if anybody's interested. But yeah, otherwise that's covered it for me this week.
Yeah, people should definitely check out. Did you get your 300 Temtem released, or are you still working on it?
Yes, I actually did.
Man,
Since
so you got a
we've been
Luma
quarantined,
and your 300 releases. That's true. You can't. You just gotta stay home under coronavirus quarantine. Perfect time to get all this done.
all of my work meetings have been happening on Zoom. And so while I'm like on a meeting, I just have Temtem in the background. And I'm just doing like free Tim, like listening. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Moving forward, we did get a listener question from Jason. Jason emailed us at temtalkshow@gmail.com. So if you want to be cool like Jason, go ahead and send us a question, and
Jason's the coolest.
We'll read it on the air and give our answer. So Jason asked, were either of you fans of that other creature collection franchise that shall not be named? He's of course referring to Pokemon. So I did just name it. If so, is Temtem scratching that itch? What do you think it's doing better or worse? So there's a lot to this question. But in short, of course, I've played Pokemon. Is there anyone that's played Temtem that hasn't played Pokemon? I find it. Everyone's played Pokemon, right? At least some Pokemon game in their gaming history, I would imagine.
And if you haven't played Pokemon, Pokemon's touched your life in some way.
Right, exactly. So what I haven't done is I actually haven't played modern recent generations of Pokemon. I've played, Red and Blue way back in the game on a Game Boy and a Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, and I played Gold and Soul Silver. But I don't know if I've actually played any games since those early generations. What about you? Have you played recent ones?
Yeah, I actually got back into the Pokemon series on Black and White, which I believe was like 5th generation. And I played Black and White. I played X and Y. I bought Sun and Moon, but I actually didn't complete either game. I kind of skipped over it. I didn't like the tutorial. It just kind of like was way too long and I got bored. And then I bought and played, what's the most recent one? Sword and Shield. And I was very, very, very big into the Pokemon franchise. Temtem, I love Temtem so much. And as much as I've really enjoyed the recent editions of Pokemon, I think Temtem is just scratching that itch so much better for me. Do we want to get into the second part of this question now? Because I can go into my big opinion on it.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep going right along.
Okay. So if for anybody who's like listened to me, you probably have picked up, I really like the strategy that goes into Temtem. And I really enjoyed that about the Pokemon franchise too. But lately, I feel like with the recent iterations from 6th gen on to now that we're in 8th gen, that those the strategy decisions that go into Pokemon have been more and more limited. It started with mega evolutions of only certain Pokemon getting mega evolutions. And then it was Z moves, whereas everyone had Z moves, but you had to bring a certain item onto your Pokemon to do the Z move. And now it's like Dynamaxing and Sword and Shield, where these are things that you kind of just have to have and have to account for and have, like an answer for, which just kind of limits the whole strategy that goes into it. As far as if anybody watched like the Pokemon Masters series, the recent tournaments they had, over the past like 2 or 3 months, pretty much every like finals, semifinals match came down to with Dynamaxing as like a Pokemon feature. The answer in competitive Pokemon right now to Dynamaxing is to Dynamax your own Pokemon, where there's never a bad moment to Dynamax. And if your opponent Dynamaxes, you pretty much have to Dynamax. And so a lot of the times it's, I throw out my Pokemon, I Dynamax my Pokemon, holy crap, my opponent Dynamaxes their Pokemon, I'm Dynamaxing my Pokemon, and now we're just going to sit here and punch each other for this. Yeah. And there just
kind of
wasn't a lot of
this, huh?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of strategy that kind of went into it. It wasn't very interactive. Like, I will admit, it takes a lot to play, high level competitive like Pokemon play, but the strategies were becoming like, I guess, less and less interesting. And so for me, for Temtem, why I think it's really scratching that itch is because we only have 75 Temtem like available in the game right now. Out of those 75 Temtem, you know, all of them have really cool, unique areas that they fill. And as the meta evolves, different ones are going to shift in and out. But out of those like 75, you know, there's like 25 that are hyper useful, that really etch their place onto like people's teams. And then like, so you think within the 25 Temtem that we have available now, some of the crazy and cool strategies and just the amount of level and strategy that's like going into some of these matches. And like Crema plans on implementing, you know, 175 Temtem. And it's like even what you would assume is like a throwaway Temtem of like the Caterpie, you know, that you run into at the start of the game, which is Swally that evolves into Luali. Like Luali has the best stats in the game. It's so good. And like even the second evolution of Raido Rise, like which is a second evolution of a Tim, is like one of the best competitive Temtem in the game. And then like the lower evolutions.
It's interesting that people use a second evolution as like competitive, and they don't always bring it to that third level, right?
Yeah, and it's just like the amount of design that I think has gone into looking at the areas where tiny Tims like have the ability to just fill a niche on a team. Like again, Pig Epic. Like I was just talking about how good Pig Epic is. Pig Epic's like on the first island, and you know, and right past the second city, and it's one of the first Temtem you encounter, and it's
and everyone wants one.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
And just like the amount of design that have gone into, you know, these 75, and then what we're gonna get for the next, you know, 100 Temtem they introduce in the game, like it just makes me really excited for the amount of things you can put together. Because how I describe Temtem is it's kind of like a chess match, because there's no randomness to it. It's all skill, but you get to pick your own chess pieces. You get to build your own chess pieces.
Well, that's a fascinating way to look at it. Yeah, I like that.
And that's what I really, really enjoy about monster collection games in general. And I think Temtem does it better than ever. And then just like, I mean, it almost goes without stating, but I do want to like point it out. Like when you remove the RNG from it, and you know everything that happens in a game is either from players' skill or, you know, players messing up, then in competitive play and, you know, those upper level strategies, it just makes the matches like that much more interesting, because you know every victory everyone gets,
that's
they
true.
deserve.
People really like that game design decision to not have critical strikes and not have misses and accuracy. Every move always hits. They never crit. It's consistent. It's tactical. It's decision based. There's not RNG in the battles. There's lots of RNG in the game with Luma hunting and whatnot and all that, but in actual battles, it's all your decisions and the counter decisions of your opponent that matter. So that is a very good point.
So how about you? Is it scratching the itch for you?
Yeah,
and
it definitely
so, what
is.
do you think it's doing better or worse?
So yeah, I was this close to, before I started playing Tem, I was so close to buying Sword and Shield, and I was telling all my gaming friends, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm ready. I want to go deep into Pokemon, and I really want to spend like that be my game that I dump all my time into. And I was like looking at it, thinking about buying it for the Switch. And then as I was about to do it, I heard and found out about Temtem, and I'm like, this looks more interesting. I definitely want to go check this out instead. The fact that it's designed from the front end as an MMO and it's all online just really appeals to me. I'm a sucker for MMO and online interactions and games as a service. So if you can give me that great creature collection, monster collection game that Pokemon is, but in a constant online world and everything in the game is focused on that, and by all means, they're still bringing a lot of that multiplayer aspect into it. But just that you're running around the map, seeing other players, I'm all about that. I like that more. It scratches an itch for me simply to know, even if I'm just doing my own solo thing and collecting Temtem and totally just focusing on myself, the fact I'm doing it in a world with other players running around that feels alive and full, I like that a lot more. So I think that's my biggest appeal towards Temtem that pulled me in initially, and I've just loved everything about it since then, and all the decisions they're making, like you kind of mentioned on, make me very happy and satisfied, and not regretting the decision or feeling the need to go play Pokemon. With that said, I don't want to step on or beat on Pokemon. By all means, it's obviously an amazing franchise and the reason Temtem's here, but I definitely like Temtem more, obviously. So
Yeah, and I want to say that too. Like, all of that isn't to throw shade at Pokemon, because as and I say this with a lot of enjoyment. As ludicrous and crazy as Dynamaxing is, I really had fun playing Sword and Shield. Like, it's a fun mechanic. It's like,
right.
when you're going through the storyline and you fight a gym leader and you Dynamax and everybody just like loses their mind in the stadium, like, it makes you feel good.
It's a good moment, right? Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, the decisions that Temtem are making in design and in their game, they wouldn't simply be possible if there wasn't a Pokemon franchise and all the history to learn from and look at. So I mean, Temtem obviously owes a lot to Pokemon, so I appreciate everything it's done for the genre. I mean, it invented the genre, let's be honest.
Yeah, true. 100%.
So let's jump into our main topic today, which is looking at the combat and just game mechanics and the finer details of them. I think a lot of this is intuitive and most players understand on some level most of this information, but they might not know exactly how it all works and what the exact mechanics are. And so I thought we'd take a deep dive and kind of go through it. And it'll be helpful for players. Obviously, it's very helpful for people that are competitive players, but I don't want it to be just for them. By all means, I think anyone playing the game and just playing through the game this information will be helpful even for the battles against other NPCs and trainers like that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and I can give everybody an overview of the stats as we talk about the combat and game mechanics going forward. Moving into combat, you're going to have 2 Temtem versus another 2 Temtem on the field. And everything that is going to result out of these 4 Temtems all going against each other is going to come from these stats that each individual Temtem is going to have. And there are 7 stats inside of Temtem that are important to note. And those are HP, which are the hit points, which determines the amount of damage your Temtem can take before it faints. There's attack, which is your physical attack, and special attack, which has a attack and special attack. They help determine the amount of damage that a move is going to do. We'll talk about the damage formula later in this, and Andrew will take that over. But as for attack and special attack, there are some special moves in the game, and there are some physical moves in the game. Physical moves use your attack stat, and special moves use your special attack stat. Then the next stat in the game is defense, and then there's special defense. And defense is for physical defense, which will determine how well your Temtem can take a physical hit, and special defense determines how well your Temtem can take a special hit. There is speed, which determines the order at which your Temtem move in any given round. You can boost and lower all of these stats inside of combat, but specifically with speed, you can boost and lower speed in combat, but the turns at which Temtem move are calculated at the top of the round. So if you boost your speed during a turn, it might not move your Temtem up in its turn order until the next round. But speed's going to determine order, and then speed is also modified by priority. Different techniques you use have different priorities compared to other techniques, and that is all based off of your Temtem's speed, and we'll talk about that later. Then finally, there is stamina. Stamina is the cost of each ability. Your Temtem has a set amount of stamina that it has at the start of a match, which it can spend on abilities, and each turn it gains a little bit of base stamina back, and then there's the option to spend a turn resting, and if you rest, you get a percentage of your stamina back, and you recover that each turn. But if you overexert, you can burn HP instead of stamina, which is another thing for if you should ever overexert and stuff for later in this discussion. And there was one more thing I wanted to say about stamina.
Was like one thing, the important thing that I like to get into the minute details specifically is when you overexert, what's going to happen is for every stamina you're short of the ability's cost, you're going to lose 2 HP. So the game will show you when you're considering to use the move how much damage it's going to do based on how much stamina it is. But the actual formula behind that is for every stamina you're short, you're going to take twice as much damage. So moves that have a lot of stamina, if you only have a little bit of stamina left, are going to do more damage, times 2 as much as the stamina.
Yeah, and I think that's
Was that what
a great note, and that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, I will say, going back to our question from Jason, stamina is one of the things that the game introduces over Pokemon that I think is a great addition and makes the game more appealing for me. I think going to the stamina system away from PPs just adds depth to the game and makes the battles more interesting and is a more fun way to do it. So that is one of the things that differentiates Temtem from Pokemon, on top of the lack of RNG.
Yeah, and we'll talk about statuses later in this discussion too. There are statuses that affect stamina usage that you can put on Temtem at either, the start or end of a round. Statuses like Exhaustion and Vigorize that will make moves cost more stamina or less stamina. So sometimes you might not even plan on overexerting your Temtem, but the opponent might put Exhaustion on your Temtem and make them use more stamina than anticipated and cause your Temtem to overexert. And that's just like another level of
just add some
consideration.
More depth. Yeah, just add some more depth to it. Oh, and we should mention, just as a reminder too, of course, once you overexert, the Temtem cannot do anything on its next turn. It'll be forced to rest. But you can switch out that Temtem and it will take its rest while it's on your team. So that's another, just an option to consider when you're doing the battles, of course. So moving along with the stats, the actual stat of the Temtem will be determined by 3 things. It's TVs, it's SVs, and it's base stats. SVs, we talked a lot about during breeding, of course. They're going to be random based on the Temtem when you capture it, and they normally can't be increased once a Temtem's been captured, with the exception of Telemore hacks, like we were talking about at the top of the show. You can increase a stat at the expense of some fertility and expensive item if you want to, but normally people are just going to breed Temtem for higher SVs. Then, of course, there's the TVs, which are the training values, and you can get a total of 1,000 of those with a max of 500 per stat. And a Temtem's TVs increase every time it knocks out a captured Temtem, knocks out or captures a wild Temtem. And every Temtem that gets experience will get a TV. So if you switch them out, or you're using the Coward's Cloak, which gives experience, it's basically an experience share item that if a Temtem on your team is holding it, they'll gain experience trying to be in the battle. They'll get TVs that way. So if you're trying to train TVs with a Temtem that's not very high level or low level, you can use the Coward's Cloak. There's also the Proteins item, which when a Temtem's holding Proteins as its gear, it will double its increase that it gets from TVs. So if you normally would get 2 HP TV for knocking out a Temtem, with the Proteins you'll get 4. And then finally, there's also fruits that you can buy that will just add or remove TVs if you want to rearrange your stats. And then, of course, each Temtem also just has, each species of Temtem has unique base stats. And the game basically will calculate between its TVs, SVs, and base stats to determine what each individual stat is. And we don't know the exact equations behind that. They haven't revealed it. But just generally speaking, the higher any of these 3 are, the higher their final stats are going to be. Pretty interesting to look at the base stats for Temtem. Some Temtem are going to have really high base HP or physical defense or attacks. So there's a lot to evaluate there.
And I will, for right here, I will add on, there is a wonderful website out there right now to use that you can search. It's called Temtem. And when you search it, Google's going to try and auto-correct you, but just, make sure you tell it you want Temtem. And it's got a really good calculator on there on how your Temtem will be affected by where you want to put the training values, those TVs, and you can play around and kind of get perfect spreads where it will understand and calculate what your Temtem's ability score or your stat scores will be if you input a certain amount of TVs on there. The reason right now it works perfectly for level 48, which is the current level cap in the game. The reason we still don't completely know the training values and everything is because we can kind of like reverse engineer it from in the game of like putting all the stats into one place and then seeing, and then they can go and work out these formulas, and that's why the tool exists. So when the level cap gets increased and moving up past level 48, I can't wholly recommend this tool because I don't know, we'll be able to use it until they sort out all of the math. But right now it works great for just getting that perfect spread of TVs of like not wasting a single point if you want to do that. Moving from there, there is, like we said earlier, these stats can all be raised and lowered. Well, all of these stats can be raised and lowered inside of combat, excluding stamina. HP, of course, taking damage and healing is going to be able to raise and lower that. But attack, special attack, defense, special defense, and speed are all going to be things you can affect with moves that can raise or lower those stats by a set amount of stages. They're just like Pokemon had stages when you would raise and lower stats. There are stages in Temtem. In Temtem, there's only 5 stages. So if you raise a stat, the first time you raise it, you'll raise it 50%. So if you increase your attack by 1 stage, you'll increase it by 50%. If you increase it by 2 stages, you'll increase it by 100%, essentially doubling your attack. And then 3 stages is 150%, 4 stages is 200%, and 5 stages is 250%. The formula for lowering stats is the reciprocal of the formula that raises stats. So it's the exact same formula, just kind of reverse. But because it's not exactly like the opposite, it's like the reciprocal, the percentages are just like a little bit different. So lowering a stat for the first stage lowers it to 67% of its initial value. Lowering it for a second stage is going to be 50%. Lowering it for a third is 40%. And lowering it a fourth is 33%. And lowering it for a fifth time is going to make that stat 28% of its initial value. When you raise and lower stats inside of combat, if a Temtem's on a field and it has 3 stages of attack and you switch it out, when you switch that Temtem back in, it's going to maintain those 3 stages of attack. There is an item in the game called Chamomile, or it might be called Chamomile Tea, which its ability is whenever you switch a Temtem holding Chamomile Tea in, it erases all of the stat changes on that Temtem. So if you don't want your Temtem to have, consistently like lowered stats or consistently higher stats, that's when you'd use an item like that. But one of the really cool things that Temtem allows is for you to switch into Temtem, do some things to set it up to get at these stat changes, and then put it in your back pocket and bring it out later in the match.
So this is in Pokemon, correct me if I'm wrong, it's different that if you switch out a Pokemon, it will lose all stat changes that have occurred, correct? Negative or positive?
Yes.
So that's a design decision that, again, people love it or hate it. It adds a level of strategy where basically it means it's going to be more impactful to use abilities, special status abilities that lower or raise stats of Temtem, because you can switch those out. Or if you lower an opponent's like attack, they can't just swap it out to clear that Temtem stat is going to be permanently lowered unless they use an ability to raise it back up or have an item. So it really allows for some specific setups and strategies, the fact that those stick. So it's a pretty interesting decision, I think. And my big takeaway here is, I always saw when I was using these abilities, they'll say, oh, your speed is increased by 1 or 2 stages. I'm like, well, that's great. I don't know what that is. So it's interesting to know. It's basically just think it's every time you raise a stage, it's 50% up to a max of 5 times. And every time you lower it, it's like, well, it varies, but it goes down to 28% of its original value. You can do it 5 times. So just something to keep in mind there. that's how the stats work and the base stats and how they can be manipulated. Going into techniques now, there's several characteristics of each technique, and that's like a Temtem's move. The official name in Temtem is techniques. The characteristics, of course, are types, which are the different types of Temtem. For example, crystal, electric, mental, toxic. So every moon has a type characteristics. And it's important to mention that the modifiers that come with that, of course, that if you use a move that has a type that's strong against another one, it'll do twice as much damage, or if it's weak, it'll do half as much. But because there's dual types of Temtem, moves can be up to 4 times as effective or 1/4 ineffective if it's a double type advantage against it.
But there are abilities in Temtem like Electric Synthesize and an ability named Immunity that will give immunity to either electric damage or poison damage or toxic damage.
And if you guys haven't noticed, I think most players will, but if you highlight a move and then you're targeting a Temtem, a red or green circle may appear underneath it. And that's telling you if the move is going to be effective or ineffective, or it'll just be a neutral white color if there's no type advantage or disadvantage going on. But those circles only appear if you've captured the Temtem you're targeting in your Tempedia. So once you have a Temtem in your Tempedia, it gives you that detailed information in the battle and will show you if your move is going to be effective or not effective. So it's just a nice little incentive to get all of the Tem in your Tempedia and complete it so you can get that visual indicator of the type advantages going on. Moving forward, techniques also have 3 different categories. It's either going to be a physical move, and it's going to use the attack and defense stats in its calculations. It's going to be a special move and use special attack and special defense to determine its damage. Or it's going to be a status move, which doesn't do damage but does something else, like puts out a status or changes and lowers stats, something that's basically non-combat damage and has an effect. Each technique, of course, has a base damage, which we'll get into more specifically below. It also has a stamina cost. We talked about stamina already. And there are hold moves as well. Basically moves that you can't use right away. You'll have to wait so many turns. So if it's a 3 hold move, you have to wait 3 turns every time you use it. And these are represented graphically by multiple bars on the technique in game. Abilities also have a priority modifier. So it's not as simple as just looking at the move speed, but that speed will be modified by a priority level, which will then determine the order of operation. And we're going to go into that more. And finally, there's possible synergy on the techniques. And that's where if the friendly Temtem on the field is a specific type, the technique that you're using will have a bonus effect, either more damage or additional statuses or duration or reduced stamina cost.
On some things that I said earlier in the podcast, I just want to make sure I'm perfectly clear about. I said there were statuses we would talk about later inside of this discussion. Temtem refers to what I was referring to as like statuses as status conditions. So the things you would think of as like being poisoned and taking poison damage every turn, being burned and taking burn damage each turn, being put to sleep. Those are status conditions, and those are not the same thing as technique types that are status techniques. So a status technique would be something like turbo choreography, which doesn't have any damage modifiers or damage calculation on it, but it raises everybody's speed by 2 stages. That is a status move. A status condition would be like, let's say a Raiken uses embers and burns a Temtem. The technique was a physical technique, but it put a status condition on the Temtem. There are some status moves that also put out status conditions, but when I was referring to things earlier like Vigorize and Exhaustion, those are status conditions and not status techniques.
Yeah, 100% is important that there can be moves that are physical or special that do status effects, and there can be status moves or status conditions, I should say. There's status moves that don't, so they're all interchangeable. So good clarification on the vocabulary, definitely.
Yeah, so, I know there's a Temtem named Smazzy that has an ability called Fever Rush, which I think is like one of the best abilities in the game. Its ability is like whenever it's affected by a status condition, it increases its attack 1 stage, And I was like, this is crazy. Like, oh, there's so many things that are going to proc this. Like, Smazzy can get like 4 stages of attack in one turn. And then I like used turbo choreography on it. I was like, why didn't Fever Rush trigger? I was
Oh,
like,
sure.
it's a status. Why didn't it trigger? Oh, it's not a status condition. It's just a status.
The small print's important. Small print's
Yeah.
important. So looking at the damage, so how the exact damage is going to be applied is actually pretty interesting and I think important to understand. Every move is going to have a flat technique damage value that's going to be displayed if you highlight over the technique. But the actual damage that the move is going to do is a lot more complicated than that. It does take that effect into account, but there's a lot that happens. So there's actually a formula behind it. And what it's going to do is the equation is as follows. Damage equals 7 plus your Temtem's level divided by 200 times the technique's base damage, then times the attack value of your Temtem divided by the defense value of the enemy Temtem. And then the sum of these is then multiplied by a modifier for the typing. So that's a lot of information. So just breaking that down, what it's saying is that you have your flat damage of your base damage, and it's going to times that by a calculation of your Temtem's level. So it's going to take your Temtem level divided by 200 and then add 7 to that, and then times that by the base damage of the move. And then it's going to take another calculation where it's going to look at your Temtem's attack or special attack, depending on the move, and it's going to divide that by the enemy Temtem's defense or special defense, again, depending on the move that you're using. And it's going to multiply that by the previous number. So you can actually have the technique damage can be very multiplied very highly or lowly based on that. So before you even get into type advantage, if your attack value is twice as high as the enemy's defense value, say your attack stat is 100 and their defense is 50, 100 divided by 50, easy math, it's 0.5. So it's going to take that'll be 2. It'll take your technique damage and it'll times it by 2 right there. And then if you have a type advantage, it's going to times it by another 2 or by 4. And then finally, so it's going to round the result from this equation, and then it's going to take the modifier, and the final result can also get increased further by stab, which is same attack bonus. So if your Temtem has the same type as the move it's using, it gets another 50% on top of it. What this all means basically is that there can be huge modifiers due to the fact of level is adding flat amounts to it. So even if a technique is 50 damage and has, let's say, no type advantage whatsoever, and then another attack has 25 base damage, only half of that, but has a type advantage, it's going to do more than double the attack because of this equation. So the biggest thing to take away is just that modifiers and type advantages have huge variables on the damage, more than just times 2. And just keep in mind that the exact math of the attack and defense, how that comes into play. I think that pretty much covers it all. And then, of course, don't forget there's also that stab, same attack bonus. So to do like maximum damage, you'd want to use a water move on a water Temtem against something that's resistant to water. It's going to get a ton of multipliers. So just one more time for that equation. It's going to take the Temtem's level divided by 200, add 7 to that, times it by the base damage displayed, times your attack divided by their defense, and then multiply that by type advantage, and then possibly add 50% more damage if you have a same attack bonus. With that said, you want to talk about priority, or have anything to add to damage there?
Yeah, just on damage, one thing that's really cool about Temtem is there's no variance inside of damage. Damage is a set formula that's always going to do a set amount. So whenever you're battling, there's a turn timer at the top of the screen. If you can do math quick enough, you can determine like some of your best options because you just know how much damage your move's going to do. But from there, I'll jump into priority. So how we've been talking about these techniques and your Temtem's speed. Every Temtem is going to select its techniques at the start of the round that it's going to use. And then based on the Temtem speed and the priority of the move they're using, is going to determine which Temtems move and which moves go first, which go second, which go third, and which finally go fourth. Priority in other games have had, and this is something like to change your thinking on when it comes to Temtem, have had tiers. So if you like are familiar with Pokemon, like the priority, when something is +1 priority, it always outspeeds anything that has no priority. In Temtem, that is very different. Priority is a multiplier on your Temtem speed. There are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of priority in Temtem. Starting with very low priority means that the move will happen after all other moves with priority of low or higher. If the multiple Tems use a very low priority move, they'll go in order of speed. But generally what very low means is your Temtem, if you use a move like Strangle, you are always going to go last unless another Tem also uses a move. Also uses a move like Strangle, where you'll both be at the lowest amount of priority, and then your speed will come into factor, and that's denoted by a dash. The next one is low priority. Low priority is denoted by a single arrow. Low priority means the technique will move with half the speed of the user. So if you have 100 speed and you use a low priority move, it means that your Temtem speed is effectively 50 when comparing its speed to everybody else moving in that round. Normal priority means that it will be at the speed of the user. So again, if you use a move, and this is denoted by 2 arrows, if you use a move that has normal priority and your Temtem has 100 speed, your speed is going to be calculated as if it was 100. High priority means the technique will be at 1.5 times the user's speed. It's denoted by 3 arrows. If you use a move like Crystal Spikes that has high priority, and your Temtem has 100 speed, your speed will be calculated at 150 when comparing it to other Temtems. There is very high priority. This is denoted by 3 arrows and a plus sign. If you use a move that has very high priority, that it's calculated at 1.75 times the speed. Again, if Turbo Choreography is an example of this, if you use this and you have 100 base speed, you'll be moving in the round as if you had 175 base speed. Finally, there's ultra priority, which is denoted by 3 arrows and a star. And ultra priority means that the move will happen before anything else happens on the field and even before an opponent swaps in another Temtem. There are currently no ultra priority moves inside of the game, but we expect to get those in the future.
Targeting, of course, then is the next category of techniques. And that's just to say that not every technique can be targeted the same way. There's a few different ways it works, which you've probably noticed a little bit, but just to break down all the possibilities for people. Some moves are self-targeting, which means they can only be used on the Temtem casting it. Other ones are single target, which means you can select any Temtem on the field, friendly or foe. Single other target means you can only cast it on or you can only target a different selected Temtem. It can't be cast on itself. Then there's single team targeting, which means you either pick your team or the other team, and it'll affect both Temtem on that team. And finally, there's targeting for all, which means the technique will be used on all Temtem on the field. It'll hit all 4 of them or whatever is how many on the field. The last section here, Ken, if you want to just talk about the different ways you can acquire techniques.
Yes. So most of the time your techniques are going to be acquired from leveling up your Temtem, and that's just pretty much standard in most Monster Collection games. As your Temtem gets stronger and you level up, you'll learn new technique. There are TCs in the game, which are technique courses, which are reusable items of specific moves that you can teach your Temtem. Certain Temtem can only learn certain technique courses, but the one I've been using as an example a lot in this episode is Turbo Choreography is a technique course, which you can just click the item out of your backpack, and it will show you all the Temtem in your party that can use it, the ones that can't learn it will have an X over them. And then finally, we talked about this last episode, there are certain techniques that can only be learned if it was bred onto that Temtem. So in order to get and I highly suggest going back and listening to the breeding episode, in order to get a technique that a Temtem can only learn through breeding, you need to have the technique as an active move or active technique on one of the Temtem's parents, and then you need to breed the species of the Temtem you want, a female of that species with a male of the one that has the technique, and then the technique will be passed on to the offspring. I highly, highly suggest listening to the breeding episode, and if you want to learn what techniques can only be learned or passed on through breeding, you should go to the Temtem official wiki, and there's just a list of there, so you don't have to experiment with literally the thousands of combinations in game of just like, can this be bred? Don't want to waste your fertility. And then also you can search that website, Temteam, and when you click any Temtem, it will show you what egg moves are available. And that's most of the time, like what you'll see it on the Temtem forum and the Temteam and other sites is egg moves of like what moves can be passed on to a Temtem and an egg.
So moving along to our final little segment here, let's talk about the different status conditions that can occur. Again, a lot of these are intuitive, but there's some specific information that players might not know. I know I didn't know until looking this up, so let's jump right into it. The first pair of status conditions go hand in hand. It's cold and frozen. And if cold is inflicted twice, the Temtem becomes frozen. Frozen Temtem cannot attack, but they can rest. Cold and frozen also will erase the burnt condition from a Temtem, while burnt erases both cold and frozen. So we'll touch on burnt later, but it's just important to know that you can clear either of these statuses interchangeably. So if you cast a move with cold, like Cold Wind, it's going to put a cold status, which is a little blue snowflake with like a turn timer of 3, 2, 1. It depends. Each move inflicts cold for so many turns. And then that will decrease by a tick each turn until it gets either removes completely or the cold status condition is inflicted again. And then the snowflake turns white. A big ice cube will graphically appear on the Temtem, and it can no longer attack for the remaining duration of that status.
One thing we got from the Temtem developers, they confirmed that, so every time a Temtem's afflicted by a status condition, when you try and catch that Temtem, the status condition makes it a percentage easier chance to catch the Temtem. They confirmed that not every status condition affects that catch percent equally, and the Temtem community has figured out that frozen is the one that best affects capture rate. So when you're trying to capture Temtem, usually using frozen is a great condition to put on a Temtem before you throw a card at it, just to have that increased chance of capturing it.
That's a great side note, just on capture rates. Like you just said, status conditions affected. Every Temtem has a natural capture rate that determines how easy or hard it is to capture it. You can look it up on the Wikipedia. And then that it's modified by two things. Status conditions, like you said, and not every status condition is the same. They confirm that they have different impacts, right? I'm not making that up. Yeah, and then also the remaining health.
Well, if I could comment on that real quick.
Yeah.
They didn't confirm they have different impacts. They refused to confirm that all statuses affect the same amount. And so it's pretty much, because they're not apples, we know it's a different type of fruit for each one.
and presumably multiple status conditions, have a higher and higher impact if you can impact them with multiple at a time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the health, how low their health is. So when a Temtem's at full health with no status conditions, its capture rate will be its natural value. And then the lower the health and the more status conditions it has, the easier it will become to capture.
And jumping on to the next status condition, it is the asleep condition. A sleep Temtem can't attack, but if you damage a sleeping Temtem, they wake up and the condition is instantly removed. There are some abilities that can attack into sleep. It's called Soft Touch, and Tateru and Hochik have it. Mental Temtem are immune to being put to sleep. And then there's some abilities such as Caffeinated that gives you immunity to that condition too. And there's an item called Energy Drink that prevents it. And then there's other cool items that interplay with sleeping, like pillow, which when you're asleep, it lets you rest. But the main thing is when you're put to sleep, most of the time your Temtem can't do anything that turn.
And I think it's interesting, again, the lack of RNG. If a Pokemon, or excuse me, if a Temtem is asleep, and unless there's some special trait in effect or it's mental, it's going to always wake up when it gets attacked. Where in Pokemon, it's random, right? If it's attacked, it may wake up, or it may not, or it may break out of confusion. Temtem's very black and white, very controllable. You know exactly what's going to happen. So I think that's good. And I learned something. I didn't even know that mental Temtem were immune to this condition until now. So I learned something myself. That's great.
And I think the other one that gets a lot of people, Barnshee has an ability called Neutrality, which it's immune to all conditions.
Oh.
And
is that that's a trait, or just
it's an ability? Yeah, trait.
A trait, yeah.
And just you hate to see somebody waste a turn trying to poison a Barnshee.
Yeah. The next status condition is Trapped, which it's a little net symbol, and that's pretty simple. Temtem can't be swapped out if they have the Trapped status condition.
Doom's the next one. Doom's a very interesting one. When you put Doom on a Temtem, it has a turn timer, and then when the turn timer ends, then the Temtem is killed outright. No matter what, there are ways to cleanse the Doom condition, and there's abilities like Guardian and the item Talisman that will prevent it from being put on a Temtem. But most of the time, once Doom gets put on a Temtem, it's pretty much a death sentence.
The next status condition is Seized, and anything that's seized. Oh, by the way, the Doom Temtem status image, it's a little skull. If you see a little skull, that means you're that. The Seized one is like a little red circle, like a key, like a lock symbol. And a Seized Temtem loses their Gear's effect. So if someone inflicts the Seized status condition, your Gear's effect will be canceled out for as long as that status condition remains. Despite the name of it, it doesn't give you the gear. You don't take the gear, but it does negate it.
Would be so cool. Just get 100 sweatbands. The next one's Poisoned, and Poison, I think most people would be familiar with. A Poison Temtem loses 1/8 of their HP every turn. It is a set amount. Toxic Temtem are just immune to the poison condition. Poison's like one of the best things for dealing with tanks and physical and special walls in the game. Except that right now, a lot of those walls are toxic Temtem.
Yeah. I love the immunities. I love that types have more play than just advantages, but they also come strategic play with these conditions.
Yeah.
And again, I think everyone knew that poison does damage, but it's great to know that it's 1/8 of your health every turn. So, and the symbol for that's 3 little purple toxic bubbles bubbling up. Going on to Burnt. Burnt is similar to Poison, except it'll be a red flame, but Burnt doesn't do as much damage. It only does 1/16 of their health every turn. But what it does on top of this, and again, this is another thing I did not know until I did the research for this, it also reduces both the attack and special attack by 30%. So any Temtem that's burnt is going to be doing less damage. Of course, it makes sense. Fire Temtem are immune to this condition. And if a Temtem is frozen, and then the burnt condition can then remove that effect. So if you froze an enemy's Temtem, you don't want to burn it, or maybe in some scenario, you might want to put the burnt condition on yourself to get out of being frozen.
The next condition is Exhausted. And I talked about this earlier inside of the podcast. When you exhaust, and this is denoted by red arrow pointing down. When a Temtem is exhausted, the stamina cost of all of their moves increase by 50%, even the moves they've already selected for that turn. So if you exhaust a Temtem at the top of the round and they use a move next, that move is going to cost them 50% additional stamina. And if it causes them to overexert, it will take that additional stamina out of their HP.
An interesting side note on this is one of Volvir's traits, when it's exhausted or it becomes overexerted, or when it overexerts, it does more damage with a certain trait, which I think is a fascinating strategy decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have to kind of think about, you're only going to be able to do it once, and we're not going to be able to do anything after it, but it might really give you that damage boost to knock someone out and switch them out. So Vigorize is the next status condition, and it's the same arrow, but it's going to be blue and pointing up. And that just does the reverse of Exhausted. It's going to decrease stamina costs by 50%. So you spend half as less stamina using techniques while you're Vigorized.
Immune's the next technique, and Immune's denoted by crest or a blue shield. And Immune Temtem can't become subjected to new status conditions. I'm fairly certain the only move right now in the game that does this is a cleansing technique called Misogi, which is a technique course you get from getting further in the story.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've never actually seen the status. I've never seen the symbol in game, so I was wondering about that. That would make sense.
Yeah, well, Misogi, it cleanses all of the status conditions off of your Temtem, and then it only puts the immune on if it synergizes with a water Temtem.
Oh, okay. It's the synergy bonus. That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
So the next one is Regenerated, and that's a green leaf. And each turn, the Temtem will heal 1/10 of their health. Something to keep in mind with all of these statuses, if you're wondering how long they're in effect, each status is not set. Every technique will specifically state, cast, or it'll cause regeneration for X number of turns, 6 turns or 8 turns or 2 turns, or it'll cause burn for so many turns. So all of these statuses can occur for multiple turns depending on the techniques. But regeneration, it's a healing 1/10 each turn.
The next status is Neutralize, which in the upcoming patch is going to be renamed to Nullified. When you neutralize or nullify a Temtem, they have their resistances, weaknesses, and typing negated. So a fire Temtem that has been nullified can be hit with a fire move, and it will deal full damage to the Temtem. I believe the only move that does this currently is the technique course Rend, which is a special technique.
And finally, there's one more status condition. It's not in the game yet, but they have it listed on their wiki, and that's called Exiled. And if a Temtem is exiled, synergies will not work with it. But again, a note, this doesn't currently exist in the game, so it's subject to change once it gets implemented. But we'll definitely be covering that once it does come into the game. Kenny, you got anything else to add to the statuses or these combat mechanics in general that we maybe missed?
I think one of the most important statuses right now in competitive play is Poison. There are some ultra cheese strategies with Sleep and Doom, but just learning how to control the field with Poison or even Burnt is going to yield you some very, very, very great plays, because everybody in Temtem competitive matches is always switching in and out their Temtem to get the best board state they can. So even if you're not getting like the best reads, but on those switch-ins, you're always putting in like 2 ticks of Poison or 4 ticks of like Poison. All of these statuses proc and count down even when a Temtem isn't on the field. So getting like lots of poison control and having like 3 of your opponent's Temtem poisoned and swapped out, all of those Temtem are still taking chip damage each turn. And you might find yourself just getting some very, very clutch, cool victories off of just, taking a very measured approach to battling. And the other one, Burnt, I'm really hoping we get some cool moves dealing with Burnt in the upcoming patches, as there's only 3 moves off the top of my head that burn. One of them that burns for 3 turns is nearly unusable, and then there's the other 2 only burn for 1 turn. So Burnt can be such a cool condition if you can get speed on your Temtem and have them move first in the round, burn a sweeper so that they can't deal huge amounts of extra damage to you, and then the burn ticks off. But just because it's only 1 turn, Burnt's kind of like a harder condition to build like a team around, like with the hopes of using it. And I think Poison's kind of like the king of conditions right now.
I could see Burnt getting really good on top of, if you're lowering someone's attack and special attack and then you burn them on top of them, you can really modify down someone's damage pretty heavily. So there might be some potential for that eventually. So also to mention the statuses, unlike Pokemon where outside of battle, if you get poisoned in a battle, and then every step you take, your Pokemon will still be poisoned and keeps until it just slowly dies in your inventory, and any statuses carry over to the next battle. In Temtem, the ticks of how many turns keep counting down. So the status will drop off after a couple of ticks, and then your Temtem will be all cleared of statuses before they get into their next battle. So I think that covers everything. I hope this really, has been a good dive into all the mechanics of the game, and everyone can understand this stuff a little bit more. All these little minute niche information can make you make better decisions when you're battling those dojo leaders or doing competitive battling. Thanks so much for joining me again, Kenny. It was great to have you on the show. Where do you want to let people know where they can find you online?
So I will be shoutcasting games for Temporium GG. If you Google search it or you find them on Twitch, you can join their Temtem community. They run the Temtem Masters, which is the current competitive rank ladder in Temtem until Crema releases the next patch. I myself run my own YouTube channel where I do live storytelling and I play Dungeons and Dragons on stream. And you can find that if you just Google search Prez B. Kennedy on YouTube. I'm pretty sure I'm the top result. I'm not sure. And that's spelled PRESBKENNEDY.
Help make sure he becomes a top result by going and searching and subscribing so he gets more hits and will definitely be the top result.
It's really hard for me because, my name is based off of President Kennedy because my name in real life is Brandon
You're
Kennedy.
competing.
I was so happy when I beat JFK a year or 2 years ago, and I was awesome. People are able to start finding me. I'm just suck it, you dead guy. Well, that's probably not nice.
No, that's funny though. So speaking of visibility, please help out this show with its visibility by giving us a like or a review on iTunes. Give us that 5 stars. And like I said, we're on YouTube. So please go subscribe to the channel and check us out there, or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. That's going to do it for us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time.
Have a great day.